so they've got a whole new rotation. Definitely difficult, but I'm biased, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next part, which is 11 through 15. Miami of Florida, Arizona, Iowa State, Kentucky, and Dayton. Just off the bat right there, one thing that stands out is the 21-3 record by Dayton, and even the 20-4 record by Miami. But we'll see here on the Miami screen. Look at 3 of their 4 losses. One of them to Northeastern, which I'm sorry if there's Northeastern fans watching this, but that is an absolutely awful loss. It is by 1 point, so it's probably a buzzer beater, but that shouldn't even be a close game. Also, Clemson beat them by 11 points. That's definitely not a good loss to have on there. It was at Clemson and at North Carolina State. North Carolina State, like I was talking about earlier, they do have Cat Barber, and he's very good. He leads the ACC in points per game, but they don't have anybody really outside of him, so that loss is pretty bad for me. And then their 3 wins are Utah, who is no longer ranked, Butler, who is no longer ranked, and Duke, who was on their way out of the top 25, and now they're making their way back in. So for me, Miami, I don't think they are a top 15 team probably even, but definitely not top 11. I think that their losses are very bad and their wins are not good enough to counter those losses. I just don't think they have played good enough teams yet. I'm sure that in the ACC they will play good teams in the soon future, but what do you think about their high ranking and not really playing anybody yet?
Well, the only thing I'll say is the good wins. The biggest ranking was 16
Right.
of their wins, and that just shows how less of competition they have faced and how they need to prove themselves. And they must be a former Miami of Florida alumni on the ranking squad because 11 is way up there.
It is.
And I'm even looking at the Northeastern Huskies page right now, and they are barely above 500 at 14-13. And a number 11 ranked team lost to a barely above like 500.
Right.
I can't see putting these guys at the place that they are right now.
Right. Also, North Carolina State, before their game tonight against Virginia, they were ranked, or their record was 13-12. So that's another team just a hair above 500, and just to attest to one of their good wins against Duke. Like we talked about earlier, Duke is a good team. Coach K always has their team competing well, and I did watch the tail end of that game. They did play very well. They closed them out as Duke tried to make a run at the end. They shut them down, closed them out, and I will say that McClellan for Miami is a very good player. He's a good guard, and I think he's got a future at the next level, but I definitely do not agree with their number 11 ranking. The next on the list is Arizona. Arizona's in the Pac-12, and once again, that's another conference. It is considered a Power 5 conference, but in basketball, they do not normally have a lot of good teams like the ACC and the Big 12 and the Big 10 do. Their good wins at Gonzaga. Gonzaga is no longer ranked. USC is not known for being good at basketball, and I don't think that they are ranked right now, but most of the season they've just been floating around 23, 24, 25, right in there. Their losses have all been very close games, as you can see, other than the Oregon loss was 8 points, which isn't awful, and it was the only ranked team that they lost to. Oregon is ranked now, and they're ranked higher than 23, but Providence is ranked now, I guess, but 4-point loss to Providence, 3-point loss at UCLA. That was a buzzer beater, so nothing really you can do about that. It was at UCLA, so I'm guessing it was a hard game. At USC, lost by 2, and then at California, lost by 1. I don't know. I don't think that they've played good enough teams to say that they're a top 10 team. I think their last week's ranking of 17, right around the 15 to 18 range, I think would definitely be a spot where I would put Arizona right now. What do you think?
Well, USC and Gonzaga, like you said, aren't even ranked anymore.
Yep.
By the time that they were ranked, so we have to give them credit that they were ranked at the time.
Right.
And the Providence, UCLA, USC, and California, those are so close of losses. You can almost count them as wins, but
Right.
sadly they are losses.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at the Pac-12 standings, and all there is that stands out to me is number 12 Arizona and number 16 Oregon.
Yep.
And below that is Colorado and Utah and USC.
Yep.
You don't even hear about Colorado,
Right.
and you hear about Utah a little bit floating in there a few times, but 12 is very high for me. And with only those two good wins, and good is in quotation marks for me,
Right.
like bold quotation marks, I can't believe that they're 12.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. I mean, Arizona has probably for the past at least 5 years been the best team in the Pac-12 for basketball. I think that we have to give them credit for being 21-5, but I don't know that 12 is a good spot for them to be ranked. Moving on to your team, the Iowa State Cyclones at number 13. Kind of surprised me that they moved up one from last week with a loss at Texas Tech in overtime, and then beating a ranked team in Texas at home. I was actually at that game. It was absolutely crazy, and you can attest to this too. Every game, no matter if they're winning or losing, they don't often lose at Hilton, and the atmosphere there is crazy. The best one I've ever been to, and I can't imagine that there's a better place than that. And if there is, I gotta go see it. They do have losses early in the season to Northern Iowa, but Northern Iowa also beat North Carolina. They're not a great team, but it was a close game. They lost at number 3 Oklahoma, and it was another close game. The losses that stick out to me are at Texas Tech, at number 5 Texas A&M, because they have completely fallen off, and then the Baylor game at home doesn't make me cringe or anything, but it's definitely surprising that they did get beat at home. That's always surprising, and then at home again by West Virginia. But West Virginia is a good team. They do have good wins against number 1 Oklahoma and number 4 Kansas. As you can see, number 4 Kansas, they won by 13. Kansas has been a good team all year round, so that is definitely a good win for the Cyclones. And they close out the year at Kansas, so that should be a very good game. What do you have for input on your Cyclones?
Well, to the team that I've seen at the beginning of the year, I am sad of what they are right now.
Right.
But that 18-7 record just, oh man, it should be higher than that. Northern Iowa definitely should have been a win.
Yep.
Texas Tech, that was an atrocious game. I was so disappointed in that game. But you gotta give them some credit for the number 1 Oklahoma and number 4 Kansas.
Yeah, I agree.
13 is a fair ranking, I think, because they are definitely not number 10. Although they are my favorite NCAA team right now, I can't give them that top 10 record or ranking that they want, because I mean, even if you want to, you can't put any more losses in that box. I mean, it's completely filled up.
Right.
There's so many losses, and Texas A&M went from number 5. They're not even ranked anymore. That is horrible. I mean, they completely derailed, and the train's gone.
Yeah.
So I don't see them getting back in the rankings anymore. But at the time, they must have been with some like mojo, because they have been they've lost it all. But we're talking about Iowa State right now, and I think 13 is fair, but I really hope that they get their groove on and keep winning it now.
Right.
Big 12 play.
With George Niang and Monte Morris and all those guys, I think that most Cyclone fans and even Big 12 fans are surprised to see them at 18-7 with a 7-5 conference record, but because they're not used to that. But they did lose Naz Long, one of probably their top 3-point shooter, and then they lost Jameel McKay for a couple of games due to a suspension. He came back and he's like the energy of that team, because he can throw down one dunk and the entire place goes absolutely insane. He's just the energizer for their entire team. I don't know that right now they could be a top 10 team, but they are one of the only teams that I am always scared of, whether the team that they're playing is up 30 points or not, there is no doubt in my mind that Iowa State is the one team in the country that could come back from that because of their great three-point shooting and just the belief that they have in each other and that whole team. So I think they're a good team. Definitely not top 10 right now, but I think 13 is a good spot for them.
I think it should be stated that, but it's not on there because Iowa at the time wasn't ranked, but
right.
the comeback that Iowa State produced is probably one of the best in recent years. I mean, Absolutely. It may not have been a publicized game to be number 1 versus number 2 like Kansas and Oklahoma was a while back, but it was amazing because at halftime, I mean, Utah on the Hawkeye squad had 32, I believe, 32 points.
Just a crazy amount of points.
And then in the second half, he had 2.
Yeah. That is...
At halftime, I stopped watching the game and went downstairs. I couldn't watch it anymore.
That's something that is just absolutely different from last year's Cyclone team, is that they play just immensely better defense than they did last year. Matt Thomas completely shut down Jared Uthoff in the second half in that game. And whether you want to believe this or not, I'm not at all biased towards the Cyclones. Whether you want to believe this or not, an in-state rivalry game, no matter if it's 1 versus 2, 1 versus 300, or both teams are terrible, it doesn't matter. The two teams are always going to compete at a high level. And switching sports a little bit, the football game this year between Iowa and Iowa State, nobody expected Iowa State to even be in the game, and you can debate that they should have won that game. Gave up the last-second touchdown or field goal or something. So yeah, definitely always gonna be competition in those games, but that should stand up as a good win for the Cyclones, being down 20 or something in the second half and coming back and winning. So that's definitely a good thing. On to the next team is Kentucky, and I am completely baffled by the number 14 ranking of this team. It has 100% got to be because they are the University of Kentucky. Just the name of them. They are in the SEC, and the SEC is not a fantastic basketball conference. They were very good last year, but this year with a 19-6 record, and you look at their losses at unranked UCLA, Ohio State, at LSU, at Auburn. The only good loss that they have is at number 4 Kansas, and that game was in overtime. And then they got beat at Tennessee. Their wins early in the year, they did beat Duke when Duke was firing on all cylinders in the beginning of the year, and they did beat Louisville, but that was a close game. I just don't think that they should be ranked number 14. Would you agree?
Looking at those losses, I mean, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 losses against unranked.
Yep.
Kentucky obviously has probably the biggest name, if not one of the top 3 biggest names in men's basketball over like the past century.
Right.
And I only see two good wins. I mean, if you look against the other ones, there might be some other 2s above them, but only 2 for Kentucky, and all those losses, I can't fathom even putting them up in the top 15. I mean, let alone 14 ranking that they were given.
Right. I would 100% agree, and they lost a lot of people last year. I understand that, but I don't think that you can rank a team just because of the past and who they are as a program, and definitely their coach is a top 5 coach all time, in my opinion. But with those losses and the losses and wins that they've had this year, to me, doesn't put them in a 14 spot. But that's just me. The next team that we see here is Dayton. Dayton is a team that is, in my opinion, in the top 25 because of their record alone at 21-3 and 11-1 in conference. They, as you can see there, a couple of teams that most of the college world wouldn't even know who these 2 teams are in Chattanooga and LaSalle. I don't mean any disrespect to Chattanooga or LaSalle. They did lose at Xavier by 29 points, which is a huge loss. But one of the things that is not in there is they did beat Iowa, who is now ranked number 4. Iowa was not ranked at the time, but they did beat Iowa. So they do have that good win. And then Vanderbilt at the time was ranked. Vanderbilt isn't ranked anymore, and I don't expect them to be. I think that they'll make the tournament as probably a 12 seed, somewhere around there. I don't think that it's a good enough win to say this is a top 15 team. But they do have a good record. They don't really play anybody, but they are beating the teams that are on their schedule. So what do you think about them?
Well, looking at the Atlantic 10 conference,
Yep.
their only loss in the conference was to LaSalle.
Yep.
And LaSalle currently is 1-11 in the conference.
So their only win in the conference was against Dayton.
Was against the best in the conference.
Right.
And I do believe that the number 15 is definitely very generous. And I see even Joe Lenardi released his bracketology that is very early, and
Yeah.
he gave the Flyers a number 4 seed in the tournament.
That to me seems very high, but I know that pretty much every year we have that one team or those two teams that don't play anybody. Recently, it's been Gonzaga, and a couple years ago they had the number one seeds in the tournament, and they almost got beat for the first time ever by a 16 seed. So it kind of goes along with the whole Big East thing with Villanova and Xavier. They don't play anybody, so it's not difficult for them to win their games that they have on their schedule. But Dayton, to me, is one of those teams that if they have a 12 seed, do not count them out in the tournament to knock off that 5 seed. I don't think that they're a top 15 in the nation team, though. So that's just how I feel.